Now, picture this. It's the late 1990s, and you hear the entrance of the Olympic gold medalist Perc Angle hit in the World Wrestling Federation arena. One of the biggest wrestlers in the company in the early 2000s, Perc Angle made a name for himself within the business for his wrestling technique and being a great competitor, while also working through serious injuries and nagging pain. But behind closed doors, Perc Angle was indulging in one of the most devastating mixes of painkillers, which almost took his life away. Today on the channel, I wanted to discuss Perc Angle's career, the rise of Perc Angle, and the darkest points in his life that Perc Angle was able to recover from. I was a huge wrestling fan when I was just little Bills in the early 2000s, and some of Perc Angle's matches were part of my core memory. I remember watching Hell in a Cell where it was Randy Orton versus Undertaker, and that's one of the pay-per-view events that got the younger me into watching the WWE. Like most kids, I stopped watching the WWE when I hit middle school, but recently with the Bloodline story and Roman Reigns, I've been watching the highlights of the matches on TikTok, and I'm pretty entertained with how the WWE is turning out. TNA Perc Angle was a beast, but he was only a beast because of the painkillers he was taking that would make him do insane moves without the fear of dying. So let's take a look at Perc Angle's journey through the WWE and TNA and what happened behind the scenes. Perc Angle was born on December 9th, 1968 in Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania, and at the tender age of 7 years old, he started to wrestle, and this newfound love for the sport of wrestling would drive him to an undefeated record during his freshman year of high school. And during his sophomore year, he'd qualify for the state wrestling tournament, and during his junior year at Mount Lebanon High School, he'd place third within the state competition. But his senior year would be the year where he'd finally take home the championship for the state wrestling tournament. Perc's high school years were great, but sadly, his father would pass away due to a freak construction accident that happened when Perc was 16 years old. But his father's death fueled him to become an even better wrestler and was great over on the football field. After high school, Perc attended college at Penn West Clarion, and at Penn West, he continued his amateur wrestling career. He'd be named a 3-time NCAA All-American, and along with the 3 All-Americans, he'd also become a 2-time NCAA National Champion. Perc Angle would finish his college career and continue to wrestle all the way up to the Olympic level. But just like the other paths in his life, this path would prove to be a difficult one. His trainer David Schultz, who Perc spent an immense amount of time with in order to get ready for the 1996 Olympics, was murdered by John DuPont, who was the sponsor of David Schultz's team of Olympic prospects. John DuPont was arrested for third-degree murder and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. After the death of Perc Angle's trainer, Perc would leave the team that was endorsed by John DuPont and search for a new sponsor. He'd join the David Schultz Wrestling Club in order to honor Schultz throughout his Olympic run. After this though, Perc once again found himself grasping the short end of the stick when he'd break his neck 6 months before the Olympics. But even with a broken neck, he still won gold due to multiple injections to his neck, which would simmer the pain throughout the competition and helped him remain competitive. This was also around the same time where Perc Angle started to get a small addiction to Vicodin from the injections given to him for his neck. After the Olympics, Perc was reached out to by Vince McMahon of the WWF. Vince offered Perc a 10-year contract in order to work for the company. This was due to Perc just winning Olympic gold and being a hot commodity with a lot of buzz around his name. Perc read over the contract and took it back to Pennsylvania for his agent to look over. Perc recounts what his agent said about the contract on an episode of Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw. During the episode, Perc states, "WWE offered me a multi-million-dollar deal. I'm not gonna lie to you, it was a great deal, and I brought it back to my agent, who was a former amateur wrestler that played pro football. His name was Ralph Cindric. He was the top NFL agent at the time. He was from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I brought it back to him and he looked at it. He says, 'You're not doing this crap, it's fake. You're the real deal.' He goes, 'I'll get you a job, don't worry.'" Perc went on to say, "He did get me a job. I became a sportscaster for Fox 53 in Pittsburgh, and I sucked so bad. It was a startup station and I had no rehearsing. They had me just go in." Now, after he and his agent turned down the WWF contract, Perc was asked to go to an ECW show by his friend Shane Douglas. Shane stated that ECW was way more like amateur wrestling and was way different than what the WWF was offering. So Perc went to the event and did live commentary and also did an interview in the ring, but he ended up walking out of the event when ECW went out of pocket and did a live crucifixion during the show, which was way too far for Perc Angle, who was a Catholic Christian, and ECW saw Perc walk out disgusted with what he just witnessed. He speak about the events of the night on his podcast saying, "You have to understand, I'm a Catholic Christian kid from Pittsburgh. To see the crucifixion was really offensive. I didn't understand storytelling of pro wrestling and how you want to get the wow factor, surprise people, get them excited, get them pissed off. A lot of emotion is in pro wrestling. Back then, I didn't get all of that. I didn't understand it. When I saw it, I was like, oh my god, it's someone portraying Jesus on a cross, and I can't believe I'm here. I was really upset. I went to Paul Heyman and said, hey, I can't be on the same show as this. You can't air this show with me on it, and if you do, you're going to hear from my attorney. Paul said, I didn't even know it was going to happen. I was like, okay, he's a promoter, it's the main event, and he doesn't know if this is going to happen. He's full of shit. I love Paul Heyman, he's a great guy, but he basically lied to me, and I understand why. Just trying to take the heat off of himself. I won the battle, but it definitely scared me away from pro wrestling. That was my introduction to pro wrestling. Kurt Angle threatened to sue ECW if the show ever went live because it was going to hurt his reputation being on a show that was so out of pocket. Now, a couple months after this whole ordeal happened, Kurt Angle started to watch Raw on Mondays and really liked what he was witnessing. At the time, he stated he liked watching Stone Cold wrestle, and his ability on the mic was amazing. With his newfound appreciation for the business, it was time for him to reconsider his stance on the WWF and wrestling on TV. The contract that Vince McMahon offered Kurt was off the table at this point, and instead Kurt had to try out for the WWF. But he was offered a new contract pretty quickly after his tryout. He'd work a couple dark matches and wrestled in the WWF's development program, but Kurt was learning the business so quickly that upper management started to take notice, and after a year of development and wrestling dark matches, Kurt Angle made his television debut in November for Survivor Series, where he'd win his first match ever on live TV. After this, Kurt went on a win streak, beating Mark Henry, Val Venus, and Edge. This push would see Kurt capture the European title and also the WWF Intercontinental Championship in just his second year with the company. He'd then win the WWF title off of The Rock in 2000 on the WWF pay-per-view event called No Mercy. Kurt Angle came into the spotlight as a heel, and if you don't know wrestling terminology, a heel just means someone who is a bad guy and that you should be booing, but the fans loved Kurt Angle and he was a superstar. In 2002, just a few years in the company, Kurt would already hit a big milestone of becoming a Grand Slam champion when he'd win the tag team championship belts with Chris Benoit. Kurt Angle was just the 5th ever wrestler to achieve this milestone, which cemented him as one of the top guys in the company. Kurt was huge within the company, and in 2003, he'd be one of the biggest stars, and his neck issues weren't really an issue up to this point in his career. But this would all change when Brock Lesnar broke Kurt Angle's neck during a match where Brock Lesnar threw Kurt into a turnbuckle and Kurt's neck would break. But he'd wrestle through the pain and was able to wrestle Brock Lesnar just a couple months later at WrestleMania, where we saw Brock almost die botching a shooting star press where Brock would land on the top of his head and also break his neck. This was just the start of Kurt Angle's severe neck problems, and after this, it seemed like every couple of months or even every year, Kurt would be out of action for some time because of his neck. For instance, in 2004, just a year after Brock Lesnar broke Kurt's neck, he'd break his neck once again during a match against Eddie Guerrero when Big Show interfered and chokeslammed Kurt off of a ledge. These injuries started to add up and Kurt was only getting older. The schedule started to become too intense for Kurt because he started to become more injury prone, and the WWE didn't give him enough time to recover because he was a superstar. In 2006, he'd break his neck one more time in the WWE during a match with The Undertaker at No Way Out, where Kurt Angle would defend his World Heavyweight Championship. He'd break his neck and still win the match. In May of 2006, ECW was created by Vince McMahon, and there was a brand split where Kurt Angle would be shipped over to the new ECW brand, where he'd work even more. He was supposed to be the face of the company, and on Kurt Angle's podcast, he spoke about being the face of the ECW brand, but also spoke about one of his last meetings with Vince McMahon. You see, after the last broken neck suffered during the match against The Undertaker, Kurt Angle's addiction to opioids would start to become noticeable. He'd need to take a bunch of extra strength painkillers in order to work through these intensive schedules. But Kurt would state that he'd only take the recommended amount before the match, but after the match, he'd take so much that he'd black out and text Vince McMahon in a heated Vicodin-induced rage. Here's Kurt Angle speaking about the last meeting he had with Vince McMahon during his tenure with the WWE.
And in the office was Shane McMahon, Johnny Laurinaitis, and Vince McMahon. They were sitting at a table. I walk in, and Vince tells us to sit down. We both sit down, and I look in front of me, and there are about 7 pages of typed text messages and voicemails that I left Vince and people in the office. And I was like, what the hell are these? And I'm reading them, and I'm like, it says, Vince, I'm going to kick your ass when I see you. Vince, if you don't call me back, I'm going to beat the shit out of you. All these threats. And I'm like, I don't remember doing this. And I remembered, oh my gosh, my painkillers. See, I never wrestled high. Not once did I ever wrestle high. I always took what I was supposed to. 1 painkiller every 4 to 6 hours. But when the show was over, that's when the addict, Kurt Angle, came in, and I would throw down 20, 25 pills at a time. And then I wouldn't even know. I would black out. I wouldn't know what I was doing. And I was letting out my frustrations by texting Vince, because Vince was distancing himself from me this particular time because my behavior was erratic. I was getting injured. I was, I was pushing to get the title. I was pushing to get on pay-per-views for the reason I wanted to get paid. There were a lot of things going on that Vince was like, okay, I need to back away from this guy for a little bit and, focus more on John Cena, which I completely understood. And at the time I didn't. So I'm reading the text messages, and as I'm doing it, Vince says, "You want to beat my ass?" And he stands up and takes his jacket off. He goes, "Let's fight right now." And I'm like, holy shit. My boss, the man who I look up to as a father figure, wants to beat my ass. And I look around the room, and Shane is over halfway out of his seat, because if I get up, Shane's going to jump me. Now, not that Vince needs it, because Vince is a badass. He really is. He didn't need Shane to get involved. But Shane, being the son of Vince, wanted to make sure his dad was okay. And I'm like, this is not going to turn out very well. And I don't want to fight Vince. I never did want to fight him. I was just angry. I was angry at myself. I was angry at the company. So I leave the room. I go outside. I start crying. I don't know what to do. The company wouldn't release me up until this point. They wanted to keep me. They just wanted me to go to rehab and take a break and come back. So I come back in, and I knew I had to get out of this environment, at least for a little while. So I walked back in, and I said to Vince, I can't do this anymore. I was crying, and I said, I'm getting emotional right now. I said, if you don't release me, I think I'm going to kill myself. And I didn't mean I was going to commit suicide. I meant that I was going to accidentally kill myself. OD on painkillers, wrestle myself to death. I didn't know. And I had to get out. And so Vince looks at me and says, "You're released." He said, "You know what? Take a break, go to rehab, come back. We'll have a contract waiting for you."
Kurt's addiction was always present after he suffered his first neck injury in the WWE, and he was prescribed pain medication. Kurt reflected on the start of his addiction, stating, "My addiction started when I was prescribed painkillers for my neck in 2003. I didn't know how powerful the opioid drug was until I found myself taking an insurmountable amount of Vicodin. To be exact, I was taking 65 extra strength Vicodin per day. I started taking one pill a day, and before long, I kept doubling the dose over and over again. I loved the feeling it gave me because it allowed me not to feel anything." He followed this statement up with, "The pills made me feel invincible and kept me in the game. Until my sister Leanne died of a heroin overdose, not long after my surgery, I didn't want to feel pain or anything. I had not grieved for my father, my grandmother, my coach, or my sister, and I wasn't able to begin, at least not with the success I was having in WWE. I felt like everything was being taken away from me. So I started to take more and more Vicodin, stuffing the pain deep inside of me. Before I knew it, I was knee deep, more like shoulder deep, into my addiction. I was hiding it from WWE, and at the time, they weren't drug testing for medication like they do now. I then broke my neck 2 more times over the next 2 years, and the bad relationship/marriage I was in made me feel more alone than ever. I decided that I could not handle the rigorous schedule of WWE, and I felt guilty about being a liability to Vince McMahon. So I asked for my release, and I swore I'd get my life together." After this, Kurt made his way to TNA. He wanted to work on fixing his addiction, and he needed some time off to do that, but the WWE wouldn't allow him to do so. Coming into the new promotion, Kurt had his addiction under control, but events within TNA would drive him to the lowest point of his professional career. Kurt Angle's TNA run was a memorable one. Not only did we get phenomenal matches when he first started in the company, we also saw some crazy spots that would drive more viewers to TNA. Like I said before, when Kurt Angle first joined TNA, he had his addiction under control, and one of the main reasons he even left WWE for TNA was because of the contract they were offering. I watch a lot of Kurt Angle's podcasts, so during one episode, he spoke about how Jeff Jarrett reached out to him to try and recruit him to the promotion, and they offered him a part-time gig with 7 figures for 5 years. Of course, the part-time gig wouldn't remain, and he'd start to wrestle a lot more every single week. But that also meant he was putting his body through the ringer every week. This would only worsen his drug addiction, and we'd witness the birth of Perc Angle. TNA wasn't the best at regulating their drug protocol, and we saw that with the Jeff Hardy match in 2011 against Sting. and this was the same with Perc Angle. As the schedule got more rough, so did his addiction, and he'd start to mix the painkillers in with the culture of TNA, which was drinking after the match. Not only that, but Kurt was going through personal things outside of wrestling that affected his perk addiction. Kurt and his wife started to have a rocky relationship in 2007, but during that same year, Kurt was pretty much handed every single belt in the TNA company, reigning supreme over all the other wrestlers in TNA. But that reign only lasted a couple months before Kurt would lose all of the belts in No Surrender and Bound for Glory. After losing the titles, Perc Angle's wife, Karen, started working as part of the company, and a rumor would start to brew within the company that Karen and Jeff Jarrett started dating after the death of Jeff's wife. Dixie Carter, who owned TNA, asked Jeff straight up if he was dating Karen, and Jeff denied it, but later the truth would come out, and Jeff was banished from TNA for 6 months. This all happened in 2009, and in 2010, Karen and Jeff made it official, getting married in real life. This sparked a feud between Jeff Jarrett and Perc Angle. During the feud, Jeff was upset at Dixie Carter for taking control of the locker room and for taking the power away from Jeff Jarrett, so Jeff seeked out Perc Angle, who was the top of the company at that time. This feud was pretty horrendous, making Perc Angle look like a horrible father. There were also segments within Jeff's house which featured Karen and Kurt's kids, where Jeff would tell the kids to call him Daddy Jeff. Pretty uncomfortable to watch because these kids were extremely young, but that was TNA at the time. But then Kurt was forced into multiple awkward segments with his ex-wife Karen, where he'd have to walk her down the aisle on live television to get married to Jeff Jarrett. Kurt also had to put up with sly remarks from Karen and how his kids were living with Jeff at the time, which was really happening in real life. This was all part of the storyline, but was true as well. Being in a storyline that involved your real life experiences outside of wrestling is pretty risky. You're bringing things that are behind closed doors to the front lines, where everyone who tunes in could see what's happening. I guess TNA wanted to capitalize off of Perc Angle the same way Vince McMahon capitalized off of the Matt Hardy and Edge feud that aired out Edge's relationship with Lita. But this was different. The man's kids were involved, which is never a good idea for storytelling, especially if you're having them call him Daddy Jeff. It was pretty weird. During this feud, you could see Kurt starting to check out mentally. He grew out his beard and his hair and lost a significant amount of weight. Yeah, he was putting on great matches, but at what cost? Perc Angle around this time started racking up DUIs and different arrests, getting arrested 4 times in the span of 5 years, and he'd finally get the right help after his final DUI, after his wife threatened to leave him and take his kids away from him. This changed Kurt's way of thinking, and he knew that he needed the right help, so he went to rehab. This was the first step to fixing his addiction. After rehab, Kurt was on a better path in life, working less, which meant he didn't have to worry about serious injury or not having the time to recover from his injuries. Kurt would retire from TNA in 2016 and was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2017. Kurt would come back to the WWE to work a couple matches with Ronda Rousey and was also the GM for a couple months, but during the pandemic, he was part of a list of wrestlers who were cut from the company. Perc Angle's life was one that was filled with grief and hardship. Becoming injury prone in the early 2000s and feeling like damaged goods, Kurt felt like he was a liability, which fueled his addiction. The WWE wasn't watching what their doctors were prescribing to their wrestlers, and they weren't involved in the medication side of drug testing, which left Kurt in a state of which he could take these medications without the fear that he'd be fined as long as he appeared sober on live TV. But he'd asked for his release with the WWE and was able to work a lighter schedule on TNA. But bad storytelling would once again drive Kurt to drinking while taking drugs. He'd eventually realize that if he could get his addiction under control, he could be a better father for his kids and wife, so Perc Angle got to work and beat his addiction. Have you ever watched Perc Angle growing up? And what was your favorite match of Perc Angle's? Let me know in the comments below. If you have any videos you'd like me to do, the best way to recommend them to me is through my Instagram or Discord that will both be linked in the comments below. Along with those 2 links, there will also be a third link for my second channel where I post low quality commentary that won't be ever seen on this video. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.